To move on to the next part of this course, we need to understand the fundamental difference between React Server Components and React Client Components. Your Next.js project is a collection of React components, whether it's an entire page or a tiny little button. And those components are named server or client based on where they are rendered. So what is React rendering exactly? Your internet browser has no idea we are using React.js or any other library. It does not understand this part of the code. It has no idea what this means. React is just a library for developers like you and I to build user interface faster. So at some point, React needs to turn the code we write into something that the internet browser understands. This is the rendering process. If the rendering is done on the server, then it's a server component. If the rendering is done on the internet browser, then it is a client component. So let's start with React Server Components. By default, all React components are server components. So it means when the client, you, someone, a visitor goes to your website, the server is going to take the React.js code and turn it into an HTML page. And then it's going to send back this page to the client, and the internet browser will show it to the person. So the rendering part is done here on the server side. React uses server components by default because it has major advantages. The first one is that the code is mostly private. So those things you write here will only be run on the server. Let me show you a quick example. If you go to the button login component and I write console log, my credit card number is blah, 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 blah. If I save the file and reload this page, you'll see that we do not see the number of my credit card, luckily. But if we open the terminal, we can see that the number of my credit card was actually logged 3 times in the console. It's because this entire code is run on the server. The server at the moment is our computer, the little npm run dev script we're running. It's a local server. And this is only running on our computer where React is compiling the code. And so React is only going to send back the code we need for the page. So in this case, I think we said that the user is logged in. So the client, so the internet browser here, will only get this little piece of code, which is very helpful because here we can do a bunch of private stuff like check if the user is logged in. If he's logged in, maybe we can check his credit card numbers and check that the numbers are right. There are a bunch of things we can do here that will remain private, that will remain on our servers so that the users, people will never see the code here. Another big advantage is that we only return the code that the client needs, so that the data that transits on the internet is minimal. We only send what the person needs. So it reduces the size of your HTML page and it just goes faster. However, there is a little catch. If we need to use React.js features like the use state hook we studied earlier, or if we want to listen to click events on some elements, we will need to make the client a client component. Right now, if I add this onClick attribute, it's basically a little React.js features that listens to click on some elements, and I add a function and save the file, I will have a big error showing up here. And it says, I need to make it as a client component. And to create a client component, it's as easy as using double quote use client at the top of the React file. And now we don't have any errors. So let's try to understand a little bit how React client components work. So when a client is requesting some components that are marked as client components, the server is not going to compile all the code. Instead, it's going to send back some kind of like an empty skeleton with some guidelines on how to turn this code into a valid HTML. So the client is going to get back this big JavaScript page, and then React will compile the code inside of the internet browser. And then it's going to turn all the client components into some client.html so that the client can actually see them. So now that this button login is a client component, you can see that the console log thing is also displayed right in the internet browser. So this piece of the code is sent to the internet browser. That's why we cannot do any sensitive operation in client components. So you might be wondering, why would you use client components? There are 2 reasons. The first one is we need the React.js features to handle user interactivity. So if we want to listen for click events or if we want to use React hooked, then this is where we will mark a component as a client component. And the second reason is that if we need some internet browser features, if we need to access, for instance, the little storage inside of the internet browser, or if we need some alerts in the window, something that only available inside of internet browser, then we'll mark the client as a client component. The default workflow for Next.js project is that we're going to use mostly server components. And inside of those server components, there might be a button or a little card here and there where we need to listen to user interaction. In this case, we're going to integrate client components, tiny client components inside of those bigger server components. There will be much more examples of clients and server components in the course, and let's start first with an FAQ.